Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Matt Christopherson, and I am the Director of Business and Consumer Research here at the National Association of Realtors. I'm coming to you from our DC offices. I hope all of you are having a good Thursday. So I will share my screen. So today we will be talking about some big picture trends, kind of what is overall happening in the market, what's been happening, as well as a lot of underlying trends among buyers and sellers that contribute to that overall picture. And we'll also speak about international buyers. Before I begin, we are going to share the slides with you, and I made them very usable, if you will. Every slide has a link to the data source that we're referencing. So we'll jump right in. Sorry about that. So first we'll talk about some big picture trends. So this is the kind of high level overall what you see is happening in the market as far as sales and prices. So as you all know, we've had a crazy several years now in the real estate market. This is looking at year-over-year percent changes in existing home sales. So you can see before COVID hit, things were a lot calmer. As soon as the pandemic hit, we had obviously a sudden drop in home sales when there were a lot of stay-at-home orders. But once real estate was deemed an essential business, coupled with changing buyer preferences and historically low mortgage rates, there was what I call the COVID real estate boom, where we had some historically high levels of sales. Then, due to years of underproduction of housing, as well as a sudden rush to purchase, we started running out of supply. So then in the past year and a half or so, we've seen the impact of historically high now mortgage rates along with low supply, which have really brought existing home sales down. Here we're looking at an annual level of sales. So you can see that overall home sales decreased 18% last year from pretty historically high levels in 2021. We'll see what happens this year. As we all know, sales are also down this year. But how do prices look? This is looking at quarterly median existing home sales prices. So you can see for the most recent quarter that prices still remain strong. This is the national median price. So obviously different in your market. However, the national median is still remaining over $400,000. And it was only down 3% from the same quarter last year. So because there is still a lot of pent-up demand, there's plenty of buyers that lost out during the COVID boom. They weren't able to compete with all the other offers. And there's plenty of other offers, specifically millennials, who are waiting out for either prices or mortgage rates to drop a bit for this to become a little bit more affordable to enter the home buying game. But how does it look in your area? So we have information more specific to your market. So here is that same chart, but we're looking at specifically the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward MSA. So while you have seen more decreases more recently, you obviously, as you know, are much higher median price point. In this most recent quarter, by the way, this is coming from local market reports. So we produce these for almost every major metro in the country on a quarterly basis. There's a lot more information in it than just this, but you can see the median priced home in your market from that was 1.2 million. Now that was down 15% from the same quarter of last year, but still remaining strong. And here you can see what that means for homeowners. So you can see while the price decreased almost 15% from 1 year ago, it's still up more than 21% from 3 years ago. So if someone bought just your median priced home in your market just 3 years ago, they've already gained over $200,000 in equity. So to put that into perspective, the national median if you bought a national median priced home 10 years ago, you've now gained about $200,000. So your market has gained that same equity, actually more than that equity, in less than a third of that time. If you bought a median priced home in your market 9 years ago, you've gained more than $500,000 in home equity. So it remains a great investment to purchase in your area. And also, this is at the state level, but this is looking at the economic impact of home sales in California. So we know that the real estate industry accounted for almost $593 billion, or almost 17% of your gross state product in 2022. And the just typical home sale has an economic impact in your state of $249,000. So this report is updated on an annual basis. It also has a lot more information than this, but this is great information to share and use with your legislators. So those are kind of just the 10,000-foot aerial view figures to know what's been happening and what's going on in the market, but there's a lot of other trends that contribute to those overall figures, and that's what we'll dive in now beyond the headlines. So I just showed you how the market has really been benefiting those already in homes with their equity gains, but who it's been hurting are first-time buyers. This is an annual figure from our profile of home buyers and sellers. This is published in November every year, so you can look out for this year's report in about a month. However, you can see this peaked back in 2010. That was the year that the first-time home buyer tax credit was introduced. And in that year, almost about half of home sales were to first-time buyers. So this has been generally declining over time. You can see before COVID, we were still at about a third of buyers were first time. But last year, we really saw that dip, and we saw the lowest share in the history of this study, where only 26% were first-time buyers. They're having a lot more trouble competing with these higher home prices, multiple offers on any homes, and being able to save up a down payment with other expenses. Now, you can also see we also measure this on a monthly basis in our Realtors Confidence Index. So you can see in August, our most recent report for that, 29% were first-time buyers. So a little bit of improvement, but this still remains historically low. So we also, on a monthly basis, we ask realtors, how many offers did you receive on your most recently sold home? So you can see this peaked in early 2022 at 5.5 offers, a lot of offers on any given sold home. However, it remains very competitive. In August, the typical home sold still received more than 3 offers. So people are still competing over what little inventory is available to purchase. And an obvious way, if possible, to have the most competitive offer is to pay in all cash. We've been seeing some of the highest levels of cash buyers since June of 2014. So back then it was about 35% of buyers. We're still hovering above a quarter of buyers, just below a third of buyers. Where in August, 27% were still paying all cash. So there's a lot of parallels drawn between the current market and that of 2008 and 2009. We all love, or we hear the term bubble often. People ask, when is this bubble going to burst? But a huge difference between that market and now are distressed sales, so foreclosures and short sales. Back in 2009, almost half of home sales were distressed. You can see that has generally decreased over time and remained very low for several years at this point, where in August, only 1% of sales were distressed. So overall, home buyers are in a much healthier financial position than they were back in 2009. So last year, we had a lot of movement within the country, but we also saw buyers moving much further than they typically do. In the profile of home buyers and sellers, we ask recent buyers, how far did you move from your previous residence? And over the years, it's been very normal for that to be between 10 to 15 miles. But last year, that really shot up to 50 miles as the median distance moved. But where were they moving? So suburbs still remain the number one type of area that buyers purchase in. But last year, we saw an increase in those purchasing in small towns and rural areas. So with the prominence of remote work, people don't necessarily need to live so close to their jobs and in cities or urban centers. Um, People can move further out. They can get an additional room for a home office, maybe another room for a child, or more outdoor space. Also, with the higher prices we've been seeing, some people simply could have needed to move further out to afford a home with the features that they're looking for. But keep an eye on this in the next report to see if this trend has continued this year. So when you're moving further away out of your area and you're also competing with multiple offers, you may not be able to go see this home in person before it's snatched up off of the market. Homes are still moving quickly. There's, by the way, they're on the market for about 20 days on a national median. So we started beginning during the pandemic, we started tracking on a monthly basis the percentage of buyers that are purchasing based solely on a virtual tour or showing. So they're purchasing these homes without seeing them in person first. Even in August, almost a tenth of buyers are purchasing homes this way. So it really shows the importance of a strong online presence, but also high quality video, photos, videos, and virtual tours. These people need to see and imagine themselves in these homes to be able to make these purchases. So that's a lot about what has been happening and what's happening, but I know everybody wants to know what's happening next. So I'll share a little bit of information that our chief economist, Dr. Lawrence Yun, is projecting. So mortgage rates are obviously a hot topic. They're historically high. They're holding back a lot of would-be buyers. So rents have been calming down. The government sector data lags a bit behind private sector data. So that's why that has not affected the CPI as much as it should have. Once government data catches up to private sector data, we're expecting that to influence the CPI figure and bring it down a bit. With that, the Fed can not only institute less increases, but hopefully have some rate cuts. We are also seeing a higher than usual gap between the 10-year treasury yield and the 30-year mortgage rate. So we're expecting that to close in a bit and normalize, which means lower mortgage rates. Additionally, and with all of that, we're expecting rates to calm down a bit. Unfortunately, as you know, they're still remaining very high as we speak. It is possible for them to reach closer to 8% in the very near term, but we're expecting them to calm down a bit and hopefully be closer to 6% in spring of next year. So what does that mean for sales? We know that they dropped a bit last year, and they have been decreasing a bit this year, even compared to last year. However, we're expecting them to bottom out, and with more favorable mortgage rates next year, we're expecting home sales to recover a bit next year. Fingers crossed. So, so that is what I have for domestic. I just want to see if there's any questions before I move on to international buyers. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A or the chat. But for now on, I'll ask if there's questions later on too, if there are. So for now, let's move on to international buyers. So this information comes from an annual report we produce. So this is international transactions in US residential real estate. So we conduct this at the same time every year so we can measure any trends or increases, decreases. This was conducted in April of this year. And more than 7,400 realtors completed this survey nationwide. We look at international buyers as far as where they're coming from, where they're purchasing, and their preferences as far as types of properties, how they intend to use the properties, and types of areas they're purchasing in. For transactions, we look at their price points, how they're financing and paying for these purchases, and sources for leads for realtors working with these international clients. So here for a little bit of background, this is looking at on a monthly basis, the number of foreign tourists that we have arriving to the United States. So you can see this was increasing right before COVID hit. We were getting over 1 million visitors at one point before COVID hit. Obviously, when the pandemic happened, we had a lot of COVID-related travel restrictions which dropped this down to nearly zero. It's been recovering. However, as you can see, we're still not quite to those pre-pandemic levels. And just for clarification, this is not US citizens traveling abroad, it's the other way around. So there's still a little bit more recovery to happen here. Let's see. And so this is also another comparison. So this is looking at a price comparison between global cities and cities in the US. So this is all calculated as price per square meter so that you can easily compare. On the left side are interestingly some of the most expensive cities and are cities in countries where some of the most foreign buyers come from. And on the right side for the US, these are some of the most expensive cities in the US, but also cities in states where higher shares of foreign buyers purchase. So even though they're some of the more expensive cities, you can see these buyers are getting a lot more space for their money and a lot of more bang for their buck. They view it as a great investment, as we showed earlier. You can gain a lot more equity with their purchases here, but even from the get-go, they're getting a lot more from their money. So with foreign purchases, we'll look at the number of purchases from foreign buyers, what that equates to in dollar volume, where they're coming from country-wise, and where they're purchasing state-wise. So here we're looking at the number of purchases by foreign buyers on an annual basis. So over the past 3 years, actually, foreign buyers have made up a very similar share of overall home sales in the US. They've hovered right below 2% of total home sales. This past year, they made 84,600 purchases of US residential real estate. And that equates to 1.8% of home sales. Now you can see we have this broken down by two types of buyers. We call them type A and type B buyers. So type A are non-resident foreigners. They're non-US citizens with permanent residences outside the US. Type B are the light blue colors, and they are resident foreigners. So they are non-US citizens who are recent immigrants. So they've immigrated in the past 2 years, or they're non-immigrant visa holders who've resided here for more than 6 months. So they live here. If you notice, we had a higher portion of overall foreign buyers that were non-residents this year. We had the highest percentage of foreign buyers that were non-residents in the history of the study. So that's been increasing. Yeah. So how this equates to in dollar volume. So the while the number of purchases went down a bit, that percentage was larger than the percent change in the dollar volume, and that's due to increasing home prices. They purchased less homes simply due to overall lower home sales and less homes to purchase, but the homes that they're purchasing are more expensive. So The dollar volume doesn't go down as much. But this past year, foreign buyers made up $53.3 billion of overall home sales, which is 2.3% of the overall dollar volume of home sales. And again, you can see how those type A, those non-resident buyers are making up a higher percentage of overall dollar volume. And that's because they purchase at a slightly higher price point compared to resident buyers. So where are these buyers coming from? So China has the number one spot. In the history of this study, it's traditionally been that China has been the number one origin of foreign buyers. For the 2 years prior to this study, however, they were down in the number three spot. Canada had the number one spot. Chinese buyers were held back by very strict travel restrictions due to the COVID pandemic. And if you're making a large purchase, you likely want to see that in person. With those restrictions largely gone, they regained their top spot. And they brought 13% of total foreign buyers. So a note, when we talk about the top origins, this is by number of buyers and not by dollar volume. If you'll notice, Canada has fewer buyers than Mexico, but a higher dollar volume, given that they purchase more expensive homes. But Mexico brought in 11% of foreign buyers, followed by Canada with 10%, India with 7%, and Colombia with 3%. And these countries are all typically in the top 5, especially those top 4. They're consistently in the top 5 origins of buyers. As far as where they're purchasing, Florida is and has been the poster child of foreign investment in U.S. residential real estate, specifically Miami. Miami is the spot for foreign buyers in the U.S. Florida accounted for almost a quarter of all foreign buyers this past year. You all, however, are in the second spot, and you've consistently been in that number 2 spot. You brought in 12% of foreign buyers, so still a significant percentage. Texas is in that number 3 spot with 12% as well. Now, these are rounded figures, so you guys do have slightly more foreign buyers than Texas. Then we have North Carolina, Arizona, and Illinois, each with 4%. Now, these foreign buyers purchase in different areas for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's simply geography. Of note, I believe it's 48% of Mexican buyers purchase in Texas. But it could be geography, it could be the intended use of the property, which I'll get to in just a minute. It could also be cultural reasons. People are purchase in areas with similar cultural backgrounds or even relatives. So with purchase characteristics, we'll look at the price point that they're purchasing at compared to US buyers, the percent purchasing with all cash, how they intend to use their properties, the types of properties they're looking at, and also the types of areas that they're purchasing in. We'll also break all of this down by the top countries of origin. So here we have the median purchase price, and we're comparing foreign buyers and US buyers. So the dark blue are those foreign buyers. You can see consistently foreign buyers purchase at a higher price point compared to US buyers. There have been some worries, especially in the news, of foreign buyers kind of pushing out would-be US buyers and making it more difficult. But first of all, they're only 2% of overall home sales. But especially when you're thinking about first-time buyers, they're simply looking at a higher price point. They're not competing for the same homes. However, it's interesting that in the past 2 years, that gap between the price points has gotten a lot closer than it was in the past. Essentially, US buyers are having to buy at higher price points, given the price growth. we still need to purchase homes, but foreign buyers don't necessarily need to. And they're kind of purchasing closer to the same price point. Additionally, remember, we're seeing less and less first-time buyers who purchase at lower price points, which brings up that median price when it's a higher share of repeat buyers. So they also pay in they pay at a higher share paying all cash. Again, they're at that darker blue line, where this past year, 42% of foreign buyers paid all cash. Again, if you'll remember, I also said that we had some of the highest levels of all cash buyers since 2014. Even with that, there's still significantly more foreign buyers paying all cash. So this is some important aspect of this is they're less impacted by the higher mortgage rates that are heavily impacting US buyers. They don't need to deal with that if they're paying all cash. So among the top five countries of origin, Colombia has the most all cash buyers, where 2/3 of their buyers paid in all cash. That's followed by Canada, where just over half of their buyers paid all cash, and China, where just under half paid all cash. So they're able to compete much more easily with these offers. So we also look at the intended use of the property. So this is looking at people who are purchasing the property for as a vacation home, a rental property, or both. And again, foreign buyers are the dark, US buyers are the light blue. So you can see that the foreign buyers, this share has increased over the past several years, where this year, half of foreign buyers were buying for these purposes. If you'll remember, we also have an increase in those non-resident foreign buyers. So that kind of explains this a bit. There's less of them purchasing primary residences. And with that, there's more purchasing vacations, homes, and rentals. You can see among US buyers, this share has remained relatively steady for a long period of time, but this has increased over the past several years for foreign buyers. So when you're looking at this among the top five origins, there's a lot of variation here. So you can see that Colombian buyers are the most likely to be purchasing a residential rental. So they're buying these properties and expecting to rent it out. They're not staying there. Canadian buyers are by far the most likely to be purchasing a vacation home. Makes sense with proximity. Whereas Indian and Mexican buyers are much more likely to be purchasing a primary residence. Of note, we also look at those purchasing for students. So some foreign buyers, they or maybe their children or family member are coming to the US for education, and they decide it's a better investment to purchase a property that they're living in rather than renting for several years. So that's most common among Colombian and Chinese buyers. So we also look at the types of properties that they're purchasing. So this is actually very similar to US buyers. They're primarily purchasing detached single-family homes. However, this year we saw an increase, and it was actually the highest share ever of the study, in foreign buyers purchasing townhomes. Now, this has a bit to do with the changing makeup of who the buyers are. There's more non-residents, and there's more purchasing for non-primary residents as well. So it's a little bit more likely for them to not be purchasing a detached single-family home. And only 4% are purchasing residential land. So among the top five buyers, there's less variation here. they're still primarily purchasing detached single-family homes. You'll see that there's a higher share of Colombian buyers that are buying townhouses. Uh, and remember, they were more likely to be purchasing residential rentals. Canadians, they have the highest share purchasing condominiums, and they are also the highest share purchasing vacation homes. It's most likely a little bit more likely to purchase a secondary home that's a condo versus a single family home. And of note, there's been a lot of news stories, and some states are trying to pass land related specifically to Chinese buyers and restricting the land in which they can purchase. But our study showed that less than 1% of Chinese buyers were purchasing land. So this is looking at the types of areas that they're purchasing in. So similar to US buyers, we saw that the majority or the largest percentage are purchasing in suburban areas. However, foreign buyers purchase at a higher rate in central cities and urban areas. Um, this makes sense for a lot of the reasons that they're intending to use the property. It makes sense to be closer around people, especially for those purchasing for rentals. They want to be in places that people want to be at and go to. And this is actually, as you can see, the highest percentage of foreign buyers purchasing in urban areas in the history of the study at 35%. And when we break this down by the top five, again, this has a little bit less variation as well. They're primarily purchasing in suburban areas, especially Indian buyers. Again, they're purchasing primary residences. Colombians, they're purchasing at a slightly higher rate in cities. Again, they're purchasing for residential rentals, so they need to be located in areas that people want to go to. Um, and you'll see in the yellow that Canadian buyers have by far the highest percentage purchasing in resort or recreational areas. They're purchasing vacation homes at a high rate, so it makes sense for them to be purchasing in vacation areas. And just a few more data points. We'll look at barriers to would-be purchasers among foreign buyers, and also where these leads come from for realtors working with foreign buyers. So we ask every year, the realtor participants, do you have international clients that are interested in purchasing real estate in the US but simply don't? Um, Now, this has actually been slightly declining over the years, but it really took a dive last year. The couple of years before that, they were held back by a number of issues. They deal with the same issues as us, as far as simply being able to find a home that's available to purchase, but also dealing with the increasing prices. But also in 21 and 22, they were heavily impacted, like I said, by COVID travel restrictions. So again, with those largely gone, there's a much lower share that reported of foreign buyers that were not able to purchase. And here we see the reasons they weren't able to purchase. This is very similar to US buyers as well. The number one issue is cost of properties. I showed you how the national median prices are staying strong. They've increased a lot over the past several years. So affordability is an issue for everyone. But also just simply being able to find a property to purchase. Inventory is very low and it moves very quickly. I believe I mentioned, but the most recent figure as far as days on the market is just 20 days, and that's a national median. And finally, a third, but still primary reason that these buyers aren't able to purchase is that they're not able to obtain financing or a US-based mortgage, which could also contribute to the percentage they're paying in all cash. And finally, if you're interested in working with foreign buyers, here's where these realtors are typically getting these leads. It's mostly through personal contacts and referrals from previous clients, or simply being a former client. So this really points to the importance of networking and resources like our global councils all around the country. If you're interested in working with foreign buyers, I highly recommend getting involved with those councils, not only for networking, but plenty of educational opportunities too, for useful information and tips and tricks for working with these buyers. So I am happy to answer any questions now, but I also highly recommend everybody follow our research specific social media channels. We have updates on at least a daily basis. And from these, you can see our latest, as soon as anything's released as far as research reports, data releases, and also uses of our data. And if you scan that code, it'll bring you to links to all three of those. But in the meantime, let me know if you have any questions. I know I just provided a lot of information. Happy to explain anything. Okay, I see a question regarding how foreign buyers will finance their purchases. Honestly, I'm personally, don't hold me to this, but I think in the next year's study, I expect to see another increase in all cash buyers from foreign buyers. Um, Again, they're less impacted by our higher mortgage rates that way. They're also able to be way more competitive when we're competing against more than three other offers for any given home. And typically they're able to do that at a higher rate compared to US buyers anyway. So I'm going to expect for them to increase as well. I can actually share a link with you all from Global Councils, but there's definitely information at nar.realtor. If you want to look more about Global Councils, we have a great team that handles those, and there's a lot of useful information. Sorry that you missed some of the audio from the Blue Angels, but I love the Blue Angels. That's very cool. And I know that this is being recorded, so you'll still be able to hear all of the audio in the playback. There any more questions? All right. Well, thank you all for having me today. It was nice speaking with all of you. And please, I will actually put my email in here just in case anybody has any follow-up questions or wants to be in touch. Have a great day, everyone.